Most of our display is made up of Colombian emeralds, simply because Colombia is truly the king of emeralds. And the ancient Muzo people have a wonderful story of how emeralds began. And it starts with the god Are,
who's the Muzo god of creation. He created the mountains, the rivers, the forests, the animals. He's created everything. He also created a garden of paradise. And to tend to his garden, he created one female, Fura, and one male, Tena.
He told them that they could live in his garden and be young forever. The only requirement was that they be faithful to each other.
So for centuries, they've enjoyed their life of paradise together with no problems. It wasn't until a very handsome man by the name of Zarbi came into their garden seeking help. He was looking for a flower to cure all illnesses.
So Fura, out of compassion, helped Zarbi, and while doing that, the compassion turned into love.
Over a short period of time, Tena notices that Fura is starting to age, and he realizes that she broke the faithful covenant that they had promised to Are.
So Tena took it upon himself to stab himself in the heart and kill himself.
Fura then picks up Tena's dead body and begins to cry over it for days. Her screams turn into butterflies, and her tears turn into shiny green rocks. Thus, the first emeralds had been born.
After the emeralds are born, Are turns Fura and Tena into mountains. That is their punishment for not following his rules.
And Zarbi is now, turned himself into the river that divides the two mountains, so he'll always be in between them, between their love.
And that is the Muzo tale of how emeralds came to be.
Stuart Wilensky has done an incredible job in bringing together many, many of the world's best emeralds, and we get to see it, the best.
Actually, I wonder whether people fully appreciate the amount of energy and how rare this population of material actually is. You know, I mean, it's spectacular, and from different locations as well. You know, so it's amazing that you can get this many pieces in a single place, but you know, you have to impress this on the population, just how rare these things are.
You have somebody who is a very, very well-known mineral dealer that is putting on an exhibition of a very specific kind of a gemstone of antiquity, of great value and of great beauty. And you wonder how somebody can accumulate this many of the world's finest emeralds and put them in one place and actually have an exhibition that shows them off in a way that emphasizes both the color, the beauty, the rarity, and the variety of localities from which these come. So it's kind of extraordinary to see this. You know, I'm sort of known as a barrel collector, and since emerald is a variety of beryl, particularly the green chromium, vanadium containing beryl, to see such a large display of these things all in one place, of some of the most famous emeralds in the world, is really quite exciting.
Well, looking at this exhibit, I'm blown away. It's a real treat to be able to see an individual piece of emerald of this caliber, but to have 30 some odd specimens on display from the major collections and museums around the world is really an incredible thing, And I'm also pretty excited about it myself, having an affinity for Colombian minerals. So to get to see these all together, I think is a real special treat. And I'm excited to see the Wilenskys continue to bring the art world and the mineral world together. And in this case, by bringing one of the world's most well-recognized gems and minerals from the specimen side to the general public here in the Chelsea art market.
there is no barrier between mineral collecting and art. Minerals are art. Maybe people have failed to recognize them for what they are. But on the other hand, minerals are nature's art. Whether it be crystals and the crystal forms that come up, or these massive concretions that are found in France that are phenomenal, whether it be, you know, mountains or other geological formations. Art is something that is not just created by human beings in paintings or sculptures or what have you, but art is what you see that you appreciate as natural beauty. And clearly to me, minerals are as beautiful as anything in the world, so he hasn't crossed anything. He may be exposing this phenomena to a lot of people, but it is certainly not one of all of a sudden you've crossed this barrier. There's the art world, the mineral world, and we just crossed the barrier and made a big difference. It's just exposing the fact that these minerals are some of the purest forms of art.
Rarity is established in part by number. So how many specimens would you have to go through to fill just 2 cases or 3 cases, you know, and establish that number relationship? You know, you're talking about thousands and thousands of specimens that would never make it into these cases, you know? So when you underscore the rarity issue, I think that's critical, especially when you look at the numbers that are attached with some of these things, and that's a reflection of their rarity as well. You know, as one fellow pointed out as Ron pointed out in his presentation, you know, one specimen, he finds it in a bag with rough. They didn't even appreciate it. And that's the other part of the problem. Internationally, in many of these locations, they don't understand about specimens and the value of maintaining the premier pieces that come out of a mine. They're looking at it as frequently as just cutting material. But it just makes this stuff rarer and rarer.
To me, specimens, like art, is not to be hidden away and put away in closets and never seen by anybody. So I made a habit of over the years of showing exhibiting the collections that I have. So I applaud anybody that does any of this kind, and I've lent my specimens to other places for various things. And of course, I'd be happy to, Stuart is a very special person. I'd be happy to display any of my stuff with him. He takes great care. He has great understanding. He has great ability to put the things in a perspective that makes a lot of sense. And so, by all means.
Stuart, I want to thank you again for the invitation, and I want to congratulate you on getting the Fura and Tena story correct. And it's so wonderful to walk in your front door and see the quartz piece that represents the Fura and Tena, as well as the emerald that is right there. Here it is, the actual Fura and Tena. This is a geologic monolith, two monoliths that are all made of shale. And they're quite amazing. This is the Fura and this is the Tena. And the reason I congratulate him for getting it right is because even in Colombia, people automatically think that, well, the bigger one is the man and this is the woman here. But no, this is the woman and this is the Fura, this is Tena, the man. And the man is actually on his knees already because he's heartbroken because his wife broke the vow of her marriage with Sarve, the river. The river actually runs in between these two monoliths. So it's quite an amazing geologic masterpiece. And I love looking at it. I probably have more photos of it than anybody in Colombia. Actually, it's hard to get to, but I have a motorcycle. And when you can get close to it, it's quite impressive. And even the Colombians feel that it has mystery surrounding it. For example, I got this far on the motorcycle. My guide had a motorcycle. We left them here. We started walking, and this was like an old Hollywood movie. He had a machete. He's opening up a path for me. And we got closer to the Fura. And there was a man named Jose Patesuro who started an emerald mine there because people are doing prospecting digs all over this region because along the Rio Minero it's a fault zone. A river or a stream represents a fault zone, and that's where the hydrothermal liquids can come up and create emeralds. So people are looking for emeralds all over the place here. And Mr. Patesuro, he just had a little structure there and was hiring some men to start a tunnel. But when I got there, what we saw was an enormous chunk of rock had come down from the top of the Fura and Tena, and it crushed this building. There was a file cabinet and a desk in the dust and debris. And of course, everybody left and never came back because this was the spirit of the Fura and Tena doing this again. This is one of the few taken from a helicopter where you can actually see there is a river that goes in between them. I believe Robert Weldon took this photo. But I love this photo because the Fura and Tena is visible from 3 different emerald mines. This is La Pita Emerald Mine. Here's the Rio Minero. This is Cunas, Totumos, but these are all considered La Pita mines. Also, back over here from Peñas Blancas, you can see the Fura and Tena, and on a clear day from Muzo, you can see the Fura and Tena. So I think it's very appropriate, the name of the gallery's display here, the event. Another thing, when you walk into the door, right next to the quartz that represents the Fura and Tena, is this fabulous 1,000-carat Chivor emerald. And it's a great memory for me because I was a beginner even in selling emerald faceted stones. I started business in 1983, and most of my business these 30 years have been in selling faceted emeralds because I never had enough money to be one of those guys that risks everything on rough emeralds, and you either lose money or make a lot, but it's so risky, you have to have a cushion. I never had a cushion, and but when you buy faceted emeralds, you can pretty much know what you're getting, and you can still make a good profit. So everybody in Colombia knows I'm kind of a nice guy, you know, I'm the California guy. But when I saw this, it was like 1989. I saw this at a desk of a friend, and I leaned over the desk, and I grabbed it, and I said, I said, you gotta give me this stone on consignment. I have a customer for it, because it was right before Tucson. And I took it to Tucson, and I didn't know anybody hardly, but I know that Gene Myron right here got the stone, but actually I sold it. I didn't sell it to, but I gave it to Dave Wilbur, and Dave Wilbur sold it to Rex Harris, and then Rex Harris sold it to Gene Myron. I think that's how the story goes. Oh yeah, really? Wow, that's quite a story. But of the 35 beautiful world-class emeralds that are on display here, this is one of the most amazing. It might be the only Chivor stone in the display. I don't recall if I saw another one, but it's fantastic. And you see these secondary crystals going perpendicular to the main crystal. Well, here it was 1989, and I had been an employee at GIA from 1980 to 1983. So the first thing I did when I got back to California is I thought, well, I'm going to show this to Richard T. Littlecote, you know, president of the Gemological Institute of America back then. And it was always fun to show him something unique or odd because he really appreciated gemstones. And so there I am in the office, and I give it to him, and he's looking at it, he's fascinated, and then I said, you know, some of these are so amazing under magnification. So he went over to the microscope, and something happened that I'll never, ever forget it. He's looking at the thing under the microscope, and I hear this sound, clunk, and he bumped it up against the post of the microscope. And I was just like a young guy. I thought, God, I could never, you know, tell him, you know, you broke it, you buy it. You know, I wasn't that type of guy. I was about to die. But luckily, there was no damage. No, I mean, he was a little sheepish when he gave it back to me, but nothing broke. But I'll never forget that sound of that clunk. Anyhow, let's get on with the story here. So this is the Plaza Bolivar in downtown Bogota, Colombia. Colombia is the northernmost country in South America. Bogota is the capital. It's at 9,000 feet or 2,860 meters. And it's a colonial capital. It's very cultural, very traditional. And it's a very pure culture because just think about it. Ever since 1988, when Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel began their basically what was called, you could call it terrorism for the cocaine years up till the mid to late 90s, there was zero tourism. So there was zero foreign investment, and there was zero influence. The culture remained very pure, and it's a very community-oriented, family-oriented culture, and it's a delight, it's a joy to visit even today because Colombia has such a happy ending to the whole story. Now they have so much foreign investment, so much tourism. It's a cultural capital of all South America. They call it the Athens of South America because of Fernando Botero, the artist, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, won the Nobel Prize. Anyhow, in the 80s, in the early 90s, I bought a house about 4 blocks up the street, and that's been my house ever since then. So the capital city is right here. It's a very convenient, easy 8-hour trip in a vehicle to eastern Boyacá, where the emerald mines are. And I always compare that to my friend that goes to Pakistan, to the Swat Valley for his emeralds. He has to fly into Peshawar, get a bus to the border, then cross the border, which is an ordeal, then ride a horse for 2 weeks, and finally he's at the emerald mines. So I made this map because there was no maps that just depicted the emerald mines. Muzo mine is here. The Rio Minero River runs from south to north. And along the Minero River is La Pita mine, which has been the star of the last 20 years. It's been so productive that it's been a true rival to the Muzo mine. Cosquez was also in the 80s a star, producing fantastic emeralds, but it's kind of on a lull right now. It'll come back. And Peñas Blancas is kind of like Chivor. Chivor is way 100 miles the other direction, but Peñas Blancas and Chivor both are venerable historic mines. However, they produce sporadically. They still surprise you with beautiful emeralds, but months and months go by without any significant production. So let's talk about rarity. For me to be in the room here, the gallery, with 35 world-class emeralds, just to look at one of them, and I'm just moved by the incredible rarity that I'm looking at. And you can get an idea of this rarity from simple geology. These stones get formed maybe 1 or 2 kilometers under the Earth's surface. And the same geologic forces that allow the crystallization of emeralds or any colored gemstone, those same geologic forces, as the stone gets pushed up towards the surface of the Earth, where human beings will find those stones, most of them get ground into dust. They just get ground in. So right there is the first level of rarity that you have with emeralds. After that, most of the stones that are up towards the surface, the miners themselves will break the stones, pull them off the matrix, mistreat them, and the mining process itself often damages many of the stones. So an emerald, which is, it requires beryllium as well as chromium and vanadium. Here's another level of rarity that we have, because it's so rare to get beryllium together with chromium and vanadium, because beryllium comes from, beryllium comes from parts mainly under the ocean, and chromium and vanadium come, that comes from the ocean. And beryllium comes from crustal sources, and they hardly ever come together, and you have to wait for plate tectonics to move things around over millions and billions of years, and finally you'll get these two elements come together. So that's why emeralds in general are very rare themselves. Color is another great subject in terms of rarity, and there's a unique situation going on. If you look at a piece of green glass, it's green because the glass is taking in light, and it's absorbing some and reflecting back to your eye something in the green spectrum of light. And our eyes, human beings, our eyes are very sensitive to the green color, more than the other colors, because that explains why as dusk comes and the evening comes, the illumination goes down, 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 and the grays, the reds and the blues turn into gray, but green is still green. And finally, when there's no sunlight left, finally the green looks gray again. But our eyes are very sensitive to that. But emeralds are unique, rare again. Look at this. This is the spectrum of an emerald. You have some spectral lines in the red area and in the blue area, but nothing in the green area of the spectrum. What's happening? let me read a quote from Carroll Chatham, who is a crystal grower, and he explained the color of emeralds. From a spectrographic standpoint, emerald is not green, but gives the eye the sensation of green. Emerald transmits blue and red light, whose peaks and troughs are alternatively canceled and accentuated at the frequency of the green wave band. Proof of this is to look at an emerald through a filter that eliminates the blue band only. That's the Chelsea filter to all you gemologists in the room. The emerald under a Chelsea filter looks red. A filter absorbing the red band would render the emerald blue. So I can actually demonstrate that to you. I have in my pocket here, this is a blue laser. It's just a regular blue laser pointer, but it acts like a Chelsea filter. So if you have an emerald in the room, and I happen to have one, it's going to reflect blue until you touch an emerald, which would reflect back red, just as I told you. Now, another thing you're looking at here in the red glow of a green emerald is geochemistry. And geochemistry is fascinating because Kurt Nassau was one of the famous, knowledgeable, another crystal grower. He knew so much about growing and emeralds, synthetic emeralds, as well as natural emeralds, and how gemstones get their color. And there is a way to determine if an emerald is from Colombia or Brazil or Africa. And basically, when I use this Chelsea filter, the blue laser or a Chelsea filter, put it in front of a well-lit Brazilian or African emerald, like Zambian emerald, the Zambian emerald will not react. It'll be green under this blue light, or it'll be green under the Chelsea filter because of a higher concentration of impurities in the form of iron atoms in the stone. So when you see a Colombian emerald glow red like this, what you're seeing is the absence of impurities in the form of iron atoms. So if we're at a show and you want to see what type of stones are in the booth, just bring your 410 nanometer blue laser with you, and you can tell who's got what. There's a book called Emeralds of Pakistan. It came out way back in the 90s, but it had the best descriptions of the geological formation of all the emerald sources in the world. And this book was my guide as I studied emeralds in the 90s and started to write articles about emeralds. There was an interesting quote by Mr. Kazmi that he put towards the end of the book after describing all the geologic formations in every location in Africa, Asia, Europe, even the historic Cleopatra mines in Egypt, the Austrian mines and the North Carolina mines, which are mainly you could say generally a metamorphic origin in a schist type rock, but he says, the sole possible exception of our classification is, of course, as nature would have it, the most important emerald deposits in the world, those of Colombia. He wrote this, despite the importance in numerous studies of these deposits, the origin remains unclear. Now that was in 1990, so the origin is not unclear anymore. It's clear that Colombian emeralds grow in sedimentary rock from hydrothermal deposits deep underneath it. They come up in fracture zones, and as the liquids come up towards the surface, they expand and cool, and they crystallize emeralds, usually in zones of calcite, accompanied by pyrite and other minerals. And one small detail about the Colombian emeralds is that the pyrite itself absorbs the iron atoms and keeps them out of the emerald itself. Although one source quoted that the pyrite forms after the emerald, you often will see an emerald with a pyrite inclusion, like Wendy just showed me, or I have in my briefcase some very small pieces of pyrite, and the emerald is going right through the pyrite. So it's obvious that they formed simultaneously, or some formed before and some formed after. It's so fascinating. One more scientific thing before we get to some more stories. I really want to share this with you because this leads us to the mystery and the magic of emeralds and how nature continues to baffle scientists. And I love it when that happens. For example, in my book, Emeralds: A Passionate Guide, chapter 20 is the poetry chapter. I think I'm the only person that did this. I gave money to poets to hold an emerald in their hand and to write their subjective experience of what they felt or anything that came to their head. And it was a fun experiment. And before he died, Dr. Edward Gubelin, a great connoisseur from Europe, he assisted me in this project because he was a master of the subjectivity of emeralds. If you've read any of Dr. Gubelin's writings on his certificates or even his books. So I learned two things. One thing is that you kind of get what you paid for. There were a couple of $100 and $200 poems that the guy they were just really off their heads. But there was a lady, Nancy Berg, who I gave her $1,000 for a poem, and she actually won one of the national, U.S. National Project prizes for literature and poetry. And her poem is in the book. It's fantastic. I love this kind of stuff. I'm just a romantic, I guess. So, starting with science, we know that a crystal is different from a hunk of glass because glass, the atoms and molecules are just amorphously thrown in there, welded together. But in a crystal, the definition of crystal is orderly arrangement of atoms. The unit cell, or you could say the molecule of emeralds, they stack very systematically and form a crystal. And here's Dr. Nassau again, that I mentioned. He was just a genius about crystal growth and everything. I want to quote what he wrote about. We're talking about a kilometer under the earth. He's talking about these nutrients coming together, vanadium, beryllium, silicon, oxygen, and aluminum. And how is this all happening? This utterly delicate process, a mile below the Earth's surface. He says, the speed and precision of the crystal growth depends on many factors, including the temperature, concentration, and purity of the solution. Assuming an ideal solution, each additional atom to be added from the solution must first find a location on the growing surface of the developing crystal. But these atoms in solution are randomly moving about, making random collisions with the crystal at random locations on the surface. How can they find and build a perfect crystal? Their little secret is that the atoms that have been added at marginal locations can escape from these surface locations to allow other atoms from the solution to find a better location nearby. Better here meaning to be held electrostatically tighter to the crystal. But these better locations do not occur in chronological order because they are determined by the collective influence of numerous atoms nearby. The best position 1 microsecond ago may not be the position best for the atom right now. Therefore, the addition and subtraction of atoms from the growing crystal surface proceeds almost like a group effort of trial and error. It's like a collective group project. So here you have this thing happening when crystals are forming. It's kind of magical, and it hints at how nature itself is at its finest level is intelligent. It's kind of divine and mysterious, and I love how nobody really can explain it. It's like trapezie emeralds or trapezies at all. I also write in the book about, yes, there's a scientific explanation for how trapezies form, but I don't believe it. It's mysterious, and I love to leave it mysterious, you know? Well, we don't have to explain everything. So anyhow, that's that little story. Let's get the right pointer here. Now, talk about perfection of crystal growth. And of course, this is another crystal owned by Gene Myron. This is more recent, though. This was sold, I think, in 2014. It's 1,268 carats. And look at the light reflecting on the surface of that stone. Do you see a little perfection there? And here's another question for you. How is it that on this perfect crystal edge with no damage, no chips or any damage whatsoever, all of these unit cells, all of these atoms, they all turn the corner at the same time? And they're separated by time and space, but they all turn that corner at the same time. I love the mystery and the fact that we're not the only intelligent beings on the earth. Intelligence, there's an unbounded, unlimited field of intelligence that we're drawing from. I love looking at that picture. And by the way, the piece is out here in the darker of the two rooms. Here you can see some of the pyrite forming, and just to illustrate how the pyrite in Columbian emeralds brings the iron atoms out of the solution rather than let them contaminate the emerald. So let's have a few stories. Thing is, anybody that's over 55 or 60 that lived in the emerald world, they've got some stories that you really ought to hear. I don't know where to begin, but Stuart noticed the extended clip for extra bullets. It's unclipped, ready to use. We got used to this in the late 80s and early 90s. And you pretty much had to ask permission to get out of your Jeep to look at emeralds. But then after, well, I'll get to that later. Clay Hands is my nonprofit organization. There's a heck of a story when we started. I just started it 3 or 4 years ago. I wanted to give back to Colombia. I had a whole career, basically 30 years working with Colombian emeralds. I wanted to give back. So I started Clay Hands. It's legally established in California, and we have a legally established foundation of the same name in Colombia. And we teach and use earth-based construction like adobe, pressed earth, and bamboo, and barreque. And this gives sustainability, it gives employment. And so we were brand new, we had some money, that's another story, but I wanted to do something. And so my dear friend, Father Gabriel Mejia, he's a priest in Medellin, Colombia. He's done fantastic. I've known what he's been doing for the last 25 years. In Medellin, he started in the early 90s to rehabilitate street kids, delinquents, addicts, and homeless boys, all between the ages of 9 and 19. And this is a group of people that the state just doesn't have anything to offer them, and they really are the forgotten kids, the most needy kids. These are just kids that had a difficult start in life. And Father Gabriel was so successful in his rehabilitation that he now has 45 centers throughout Colombia. The state of Colombia gave him 2 juvenile detainment facilities, and these 2 facilities had really bad reputations. But Father Gabriel was so funny. He goes, "Ronald, it's like an English school now. You know, they eat lunch off of tablecloths, you know, and they behave themselves." His rehabilitation, of course, is Catholic religion, service, but yoga, also transcendental meditation. It's working. And he was just, in February of this year, he was invited to Rome to speak in the Vatican with the Pope about rehabilitation because it's such an important thing. So I said to Father Gabriel, you need me to build you a shed or a tool shed or a little house or something on one of your compounds. And of course, yeah, he knows how to work people. And he goes, you know, I need a meditation hall for 110 boys. So I thought about it, and $63,000 later, we built this. This was beautiful. This is 10 meters by 15 meters. And it's on a cement platform with nice tile. I mean, we wanted to do a nice job. And this is used twice a day by these boys. And you talk to these boys and you see yourself reflected in their eyes. It's just, you know, these are just kids that had a tough first part of their life. They're going to be great later on. Anyhow, this is 2 hours north of Bogota. I live in Bogota when I'm on my trips there. But I have a guy named Miguelito, and he drives me to the emerald mines. He's from Muzo. He was driving me here to Sasaima before we got there. And guess what? Anybody recognize Rodriguez Gacha? If you've seen the Netflix series called Narcos, you know that Rodriguez Gacha killed Gilberto Molina in 1989, and it was a massacre. He killed 18 people that day, including Gilberto Molina, he was the main controller of the Muzo emerald mine back in 1989. Because he was part of the Medellin cartel. He wanted to get into the emerald mine because first of all, it's a trophy, and second of all, you can launder tons of money through an emerald mine. And this whole story became famous in the Netflix series called Narcos. But what I want to tell you is that this is taken from the Narcos series, episode 1, number 1, and the Ochoa brothers are showing off their horses to each other, and the narrator says, and even by Colombian standards, the emerald business is a pretty tough business. And my friends and I are going, yeah, damn right. But this is the actual compound where Gilberto Molina was killed. And Miguelito, we're driving there, and Miguelito tells me, Ronald, this is the compound where Gilberto Molina was killed. I don't believe you. But I checked it, and it turned out it was. And what happened was that after the massacre, the Colombian government took it and held it for 5 years because its ownership was questionable, especially since it was a drug killing. And they saw Father Gabriel doing a beautiful job rehabilitating kids, and so the Colombian government gave this, it's a whole compound on like 10 acres, they gave it to Father Gabriel. And that's where I drove, and that's how my nonprofit got started. And we completed a big circle of 28 years because guess who donated some money to our endeavors to build the compound there? Edwin Molina, the grandson of Gilberto Molina, who was killed in that massacre. For 3 years, from 2014 to 2017, I worked for the Muzo Emerald Company, a US-based, Houston-based company that purchased and now operates the Muzo Emerald Mine in Colombia. And it was the culmination of my whole career. It was just so wonderful to be surrounded by emeralds. I was out at the mine during a huge production, and the production was in soft rock. You can see how nicely hexagonal a lot of these pieces came out. And so it was quite a thrill. And then back in Bogota, I helped set up the cutting, the faceting, the oil treatment of emeralds, along with the pricing and marketing of the stones through European sources. For me, it was just wonderful. Every 2 months, I would be in a room with 200-300 faceted, completed emeralds, faceted emeralds, and I'd have to put a price on all of them. Talk about subjectivity here, because this is what we love about colored stones in general. Colored stones, there's no price list. Not like diamonds, where you can determine the absence of color, the clarity, go over to the price list, and you got your price, and they take the discount from, all that. You can be an accountant, and do that. Not that there's anything wrong with accountants, but colored stone people are as unique as the stones they sell, because every single stone, faceted or otherwise, it's a work of art, and you have to agree, you have to negotiate and agree subjectivity on a price. There's no price list. We love it. We love it. And now here's another story. My wife's not here tonight, so I can tell this story. This is Hernando Sanchez. He started out as one of the security men for Victor Carranza, and which means that in the early 90s and mid 90s, he was in a number of gunfights, because as soon as Gacha Rodriguez killed Gilberto Molina, it was the start of what we call the Emerald Wars. The Netflix series on Narcos went off to explain and show the whole narco thing that happened with the cocaine, but the Emerald Wars was a separate thing started by Gacha Rodriguez, and basically the cartel was trying to take over the Muzo mine, and it didn't happen, because the emerald miners are a pretty tough group of guys, thanks to him and some other guys. So he's had a rough beginning of his life, but he became the confidant of Victor Carranza, started selling. His brother and him started selling emeralds. And look at this piece here. Gene Myron is nodding his head. He knows. This piece is called El Itoco. It's 443 carats, and it's a perfect hexagon. This is another story, and this one got cut, but let's hear about this piece. 443 carats, it's exactly 4 inches tall and 1 inch wide. The thing about it was top color, absolutely the best color from La Pita mine, and so it wasn't easy to sell because the price, it was worth $1.2 million, maybe a little more. It stayed in Colombia for a couple of years. Finally, Hernando gave it to me to bring to the United States and do what we always do with these rare pieces. Take it to the Van Pelts, get a Hollywood photo taken of it, take it to GIA and have them do a cert and maybe leave it in their museum for a few months. You know, this is how you get things happening with these rare pieces. And I did that, and I even did more. This happens to be Hernando's finca, his farm. He had 25 horses at this farm. Each horse had a beautiful wooden little apartment, I'd have to say. And above the door with these huge iron hinges was the name of the horse carved in stone. You know, so this guy's in another world. Anyhow, this is the GIA display that Terry Ottaway put together. This was a famous necklace, I forget the name. So I even had an artist in Colombia do a painting of El Itoco because it was just it was an iconic stone. So these are the Muisca Indians, all the symbols of the Fura and Tena. There's the Fura and Tena again, the moon, the stars, the sun, the fire, and here's some mineral specimens around the ground. So what was happening was I was down in Colombia. I was actually leading a tour of the emerald mine with the Bowers Museum of Cultural History in Santa Ana, led by Peter Keller. And but I got a phone call on my cell phone that, Ronald, we have to get that stone, El Itoco, to New York because Mr. So-and-so is going to buy it and we're going to negotiate it. So you got to get it. Well, no, I can't do that. I'm in Colombia right now. And he goes, oh, we got to do it. So I called my wife. You know, she's back home and she knows my hiding place. I never put the important stuff in a safe because that's the first place any thief is going to go. All my important stuff is in the hiding places, you know. But my wife got it out and I told her how to put it in the box, and I called Brinks to come and get it, you know, and it was, I shouldn't have, anyhow. So, because see, this piece, it had its little stand, it had some lights, you know, and other things. So she got it in a box and sent it to New York with Brinks. And I went into it. I got another phone call from New York a few days later, but at that moment I was taking the group into a tunnel. But they go, we opened the box, the stone is not in the box, it's stolen, what happened? And I go, well, it had to be in the box. You should call the police, I don't know what else to do. The stone was in the box, you know, and it got to you through Brinks. I verified that it was the right Brinks. And then I went in the tunnel. So an hour later, I come out, because I'd already called my wife, and she already verified that she sent it, and the Brinks guy and all that. So I'm out of the tunnel again, and another hour goes by, and I thought, well, I'll just call Linda again. Linda, are you sure? And then she goes, well, yes. And then there's this pause on the phone. And she goes, it's on the printer. She got everything in the box, but it was on the printer. It was going to go in last, you know. She goes, it's sitting on the printer. Okay. So now I have to tell you that Hernando, because he was Victor Carranza's #1 man, Carranza suffered several attempts on his life, but there's a YouTube video that went viral in Colombia because Hernando Sanchez suffered an assassination attempt at a men's clothing store where he's looking at some jackets, and the store camera shows an assassin running in, shooting him 5 times with a .32 caliber gun. And as he's falling towards the floor, he pulls out his gun and shoots back at the guy that's trying to kill him. And he wounded the man. The man got away, but he survived with 5 bullets. He lost a kidney, and he's blind in one eye, but he's okay. I saw him just 8 days ago in Colombia. But anyhow, here's the culmination of this story. Don't we love stories as colored stone people? Okay, so I'm in Bogota a couple of years ago with, I think it was the October Symposium on Emeralds, and Hernando was there. The whole emerald industry of Bogota was there. And we were kind of standing around and talking, and he turns and he goes, "Ronald, do you know that when your wife lost that emerald, I felt worse than when I was 5 bullets in it?" Luckily, Linda was not there either. But everything's okay now. But because of the price of that stone, it belongs in this gallery, but unfortunately nobody came up with the money for that stone. It was faceted into many stones, and it was a little bit over color. You know, the faceter had to make very shallow pavilions to allow the body color to come through and bring out the beauty of that color, but some time went by, and now it's just a good memory. If you go to YouTube and look up the $400 million emerald, you'll see the National Geographic Explorer show of 55 minutes, and the first half of the show is about Colombia, and that's me. And this was made in Hollywood. How do you like this, Gene? Would you like to have this mineral specimen? This is how good Hollywood can be at making stuff out of fiberglass and plastic. So anyhow, I guess we could just end the story there, and thank you, and I thank the gallery for supporting Clay Hands. We're a new nonprofit, and we have big plans. Father Gabriel Mejia will be involved in our next project as well. So just so you know, thank you for your attention.